কি সুন্দর।
Are these the Alps?
অ্যালপসের ফুটহিলস। এখান থেকে শুরু হয়েছে অ্যালপস।
So very important now that we're going to go into the next room to talk about Michelangelo. Very important to keep in mind that he did not do anything like this. He didn't have to make models to carve from, and that's what makes him so unique. And Michelangelo would start with a block of marble. He would look at it, he would imagine what could be inside of that block of marble. Then he'd pick up his tools, after maybe making a few preparatory sketches but no models. He picked up those tools and he would start carving this piece, keeping it all up here in his head. That's what makes him so unique. So let's now go into the next room. I want to take you straight down to the David, tell you about David, two other works by Michelangelo, then I'll give you some time to go back around. What are you doing? Yeah. See? Folks get a copy of him up there on the hill this morning, but it's nothing like standing in front of the real thing. Let me give you a couple of facts about David. He stands 13 feet tall. Okay, that's from just under where his feet is, because he's of course up on a pedestal. Just under where his feet are up to the top of his head. 13 feet tall. He weighs 19 tons, and he was carved out of one single block of marble. That was quite a block of marble. We actually have a history behind this block of marble. This block we know was brought from the mountains of Carrara, which are just north of Pisa along the seacoast. These are mountains made out of almost solid marble. The Italians today still carve out of those mountains every single year about 1.4 million tons of white marble. And they ship that all over the world. So if you have some white marble at home, chances are it comes from Carrara. Well, this mammoth block was brought to Florence by way of water. So first, they hauled it down from the hills on these carts, they put it on a small barge along the seacoast, and then up the Arno River, because remember that was navigable. And we know that that block was here about 30 years before Michelangelo was even born. Long time. It was given into commission to a couple of different artists during that period of time, but none of these artists started the block. We don't know exactly why. Maybe they weren't quite sure of their projects. Maybe they didn't feel capable enough of carving this block of marble, and they didn't want to ruin it. So both of these artists abandoned their projects and abandoned this block. This block was out behind where the cathedral is today. Back where you have the courtyard of the museum of the cathedral, that's actually where David was carved. This block had just been abandoned there until 1501, when Michelangelo receives a commission from the city's government to carve a David to go atop the cathedral. And we know that it never goes on top of the cathedral, right? It goes out in front of City Hall. But before I explain why, I want to tell you a little bit about David. We all remember David, right? The story of David and Goliath from the Old Testament of the Bible. Of course, David was a very young Jewish boy, probably only about 14 or 15 years old. And this young boy, what is his claim to fame? He defeats the giant, the Philistine Goliath, was coming to wreak havoc on his town and his people. Well, how was a little boy supposed to defeat a giant? Not with brute strength, right? What does he do?
He uses a sling.
That's right, he has a sling, which isn't a slingshot with a rubber band on it, huh? It's a big long strap with a pouch at the end. And he's gonna put a rock in there, he's gonna twirl it around like this, and he'll launch it, he hits Goliath in the head, he falls to the ground unconscious, and David comes along with his sword and cuts off the head of the Goliath. He saves the day, he saves his people, he saves his city. So he's the hero. This is Michelangelo's interpretation of David. Doesn't sound exactly like the David I just described, huh? He's not a 14 or 15-year-old boy, but a full-grown young, huh? But a full-grown young adult male, huh? He looks like he could probably hold his own against any giant. Also, there's nothing really explicit about him. Let's move up. That tells us he's a David. Nothing explicit that tells us he's Jewish. How do we know that this is a David? Because he looks very classical, doesn't he? This could easily be an Hercules or an Apollo.